Are you struggling in your marriage? You need to hear this. I can share 3 powerful tips that could change everything. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I dive into some real talk about marriage struggles and see if these 3 powerful tips could change everything in your marriage life. Now, I know relationships can be tough, but I believe there are some powerful strategies that can truly transform your marriage. In this video, I'm going to share 3 tips that could change everything. Yes, 3. So stick around because these tips might just be the game changers you're looking for. First off, let's talk about something we need to normalize. Struggling in your marriage is okay. I think it's important to recognize that every relationship goes through difficult phases. No one gets married expecting constant happiness, but the reality is that a healthy marriage takes work. And sometimes, the work can be challenging. You might have heard stories from couples who seem to have it all together. But trust me, behind every strong marriage, there are moments where things got tough. Maybe it's about differing opinions on finances, raising kids, or even feeling disconnected emotionally. These struggles don't mean you failed, they mean you're human. Example, think about it this way. Imagine 2 people who are trying to build a house. At first, they have a blueprint and everything seems exciting. But as they start building, they hit snags. The walls don't align perfectly, or maybe the foundation isn't as solid as they thought. The same happens in marriage. Just because the foundation shakes doesn't mean the house has to fall. One of the most common issues we see in marriages is communication breakdown. This is a biggie. It's not just about talking, it's about connecting on a deeper level. How often do we find ourselves talking at our partners instead of to them? Maybe we think we're communicating, but we're not really listening to what the other person is saying. You know that feeling when you're speaking and it seems like your words are bouncing off a wall? Or worse, when you're listening, but you're just waiting for your turn to speak. That's when communication falters, and it can feel like you're living with a stranger. Example, let's say you've had a long day at work, and when you get home, you try to share your frustrations. But instead of a supportive response, your partner just talks about their own bad day. Now both of you feel unheard. That's how small communication gaps can snowball into major issues. Tip number 1. Here's the first tip. Start practicing active listening. The next time your partner speaks, really focus on their words, not just your response. Put yourself in their shoes. You might be surprised at how just listening can reignite your connection. Now let's talk about intimacy, and I don't just mean the physical kind. Yes, physical intimacy is important, but emotional intimacy is the glue that holds everything together. When you start feeling more like roommates than partners, that's a sign that emotional intimacy is lacking. How many of you have felt like the passion has faded, or that you're just going through the motions? When we lose that emotional connection, everything else starts to feel forced. But here's the good news. You can rebuild intimacy if you're willing to work on it. Example, I remember a couple sharing how they started feeling distant after the birth of their child. They were so focused on being parents that they forgot to nurture each other. It took them months of intentional effort, date nights, little love notes, and open conversations to get back to where they once were. Tip number 2. The second tip, be intentional about reconnecting emotionally. This could be as simple as setting aside uninterrupted time to talk, or maybe even starting a new hobby together. Small acts of care, like leaving a note, or sending a random text during the day can rekindle that connection. Next, let's address the feeling of growing apart. This can be one of the scariest moments in a marriage, when you look at your partner and think, who are you? And how did we get here? It's a feeling of drifting, and sometimes it happens so gradually you don't even notice until you're miles apart. Growing apart usually happens because of emotional disconnect. Maybe it's caused by life stressors like work, kids, or financial pressure. Sometimes we get so caught up in these external factors that we forget to nurture the person we fell in love with. Before we know it, we've built walls instead of bridges. Example: imagine you and your partner are standing on opposite sides of a river. You want to cross, but every time you try, the current gets stronger. What's the solution? Building a bridge, slowly, brick by brick. Each brick represents an effort to connect, whether it's through communication, intimacy, or shared experiences. Tip number 3. The third tip: rebuild your bridge. This means making time for each other, even if life is chaotic. Date nights, shared goals, and even just taking walks together can help you find common ground again. It's all about prioritizing your relationship over the distractions. Now, why do these problems arise in the first place? Sometimes it's simply life getting in the way. Stress at work, health problems, or just the daily grind can distract us from prioritizing our relationship. We start taking each other for granted because we assume our partner will always be there. Another big reason is differing expectations. Maybe you and your partner have different ideas of what your marriage should look like. One person might want more adventure, while the other craves routine. It's not easy to find balance when you're pulling in opposite directions, but compromise is key. Example: a couple I know was struggling because one partner wanted to travel and explore the world, while the other preferred staying home and focusing on work. They found common ground by planning small trips together, fulfilling both needs. It wasn't easy, but it worked because they were willing to meet halfway. So, after all this, where do we go from here? The bottom line is that every marriage faces struggles. But here's the hope. Every marriage can also be healed. It takes effort, it takes time, but with emotional reconnection and intentional action, you can transform your relationship. Remember, it's okay to seek help, whether that's through counseling, talking to friends, or watching videos like this. Don't be afraid to take that first step. Struggling doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're in the middle of a process, and there's always room for growth. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this video. I hope these tips help you feel empowered to take action in your relationship. If you've been through similar struggles, share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've worked through your challenges. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because in the next video, I'll be diving into even more strategies for building a stronger, happier marriage.